This Sunday and next Sunday left in the book of James, and we'll be done with this series. We'll have 1 week. We'll talk about the Christmas story, and we'll have Christmas Eve. And then in January, first Sunday of January, we'll start a brand new series called Conversations with Jesus. We're going to be looking at individual conversations that Jesus had with people in the New Testament. So it should be a fascinating and insightful series, so we look forward to that, and that series will last us probably through Easter, so that's kind of the preview of what's to come. Christmas is kind of a waiting game, isn't it? Anybody waiting on an ordered gift that you're nervous is not going to make it? Anybody with me? Anybody order anything from China you're kind of hoping gets here in 2026. I've been in that boat. Waiting on gifts. If you're a kid, you're waiting on Christmas morning. You're waiting for it to get here. You are anticipating. Some of you are waiting on 11 o'clock to get here. And then you're going to act like you're looking at the scriptures on your phone to see if an undeserved Alabama team makes it into the tournament. Waiting on stuff. Anybody else have the spiritual gift of guessing presents? Like you know what you're getting, you just like can look at it and know. Like it drives my family crazy. I can kind of say, oh, that's what I'm getting. Usually it's because I only ask for like 3 things. But I can have this memory when I was a kid and my younger brother was 7 years younger than me, and he was probably, 4 at the time, and it was that time where he was old enough where they were starting to let him give a gift to his siblings, and he put a gift under the tree for me, and I walked up and picked up the gift and squeezed it and was like, oh, socks, huh? And he burst into tears because I guessed the gift, the spiritual gift of present gifting. Guessing. How about we have any present charlatans in the room? Like you've opened up your present ahead of time secretly to see what you were getting? Like cut the tape. Susan Lewis is looking at me like this look of panic on her face. She's such a rules keeper. She can't imagine sneaking in and opening a gift to see what it was beforehand. I've done that before. I've slid open the tape, looked at the present, wrapped it back up. Don't act like I'm the only person in this room that has done that. Present charlatans getting the sneak peek, waiting on Christmas to get here and everything that goes with it. Does anyone in this room enjoy waiting? None of us do. None of us enjoy waiting. I don't like waiting at red lights. I want the light to turn before it does. There's this one light, if you leave here and you're going and you want to get over onto the belt line or whatever, there's the one light you don't want to get at that light. Which one is it, babe? 31 and what? Corsby. Like, do not turn there waiting on that red light to change. It takes forever. We don't like to wait. I don't like to wait in the doctor's office. I always say, like, patience is the wrong name for those of us who are waiting. Like, I get us a different spelling, but none of us have patience while we're waiting. I think I offended my doctor recently because I always want to get the first appointment, right? It's like, I know there's no one ahead of me. You should be able to get there in time to see me. And I had to move some meetings and kept waiting for like an hour. And he made the mistake of asking me how I was doing when he walked in. And I was honest with him that I wasn't doing very well because I'd been waiting for over an hour and I had places to be and things to do, just like he does. So that you can imagine how that doctor's appointment went. But I don't like waiting. I had to sit in traffic this week for an hour. It took me an hour and 15 minutes to get home from Madison because someone decided to have a wreck on the bridge. And so waiting, some others of you maybe got caught in that same traffic. We don't like to wait. These are moments that test our patience. But the truth of it is most of us are waiting on things that are bigger than a delayed Christmas present or the red light to change. Maybe you're waiting on a prayer to be answered that you're unsure is going to be answered, at least in the way that you are anticipating. Some of you are in a terrible job situation and you're waiting for a job change, or maybe you're waiting on a job. Some of you are waiting on a relationship to heal that's been fractured and hurt, and you're waiting on reconciliation or healing in a relationship. Some of you are waiting on relief from some type of pressure that you're feeling, some type of anxiety or fear. Some of you are waiting on your body to mend. And it's a long process, and you're not getting there as quickly as you would like. Or maybe you're waiting on a sickness to go away. Maybe you're waiting on God to come through in your life in some way. And if we're honest with each other, waiting can be exhausting, can it? It's exhausting waiting to see what God's plan is and how it's going to unfold. And the entire letter of James is written to this group of people who are exhausted from waiting to see what God's going to do. He writes to this group of Jewish followers who have walked away from their traditional faith, and they have embraced Jesus as the Messiah. And then they have been scattered throughout the Roman Empire as a result of this. They have been displaced, and they are living as this suffering minority under immense social pressure, economic pressure, and they have been relocated. They have been slandered. They've been taken advantage of, persecuted. They've been ostracized from the world and into this real world, everyday life exhaustion. James writes, and he writes words of hope and wisdom and admonition and encouragement to reassure them that their suffering, that this season is not unnoticed by God. And it's not meaningless, that God is still in control and He is at work. And this section that we have read this morning and we're diving into today, it comes immediately after, if you were here last week, this prophetic warning that James gave against wealthy oppressors, people that were wealthy and oppressing those who were not. And now he flips the conversation and addresses not the oppressors like he did last week, but those who are being oppressed. And he encourages endurance and faithfulness in the face of suffering. And he does this by anchoring everything in the promise of the Lord's return. And so if we're kind of putting a big idea around this section of Scripture, what James is teaching today is when you don't know what God is doing, you can still trust who God is. When you do not know what He's doing, you can still trust who He is. And James provides us words of encouragement on how to live when we are exhausted and tired from waiting. So let's dive into our text, verse 7. Be patient, therefore, brothers. And I didn't, until we did this study through James, even though I've studied James multiple times, did not notice how many times he uses his family language, his family of faith. Be patient, therefore, family, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. So James provides us words of encouragement. And the first thing that he tells us in these first two verses, like, be patient in your waiting because the Lord's coming. He's coming again. So be patient. You can be patient in your waiting because we're guaranteed the Lord is returning. This word, therefore, is at the beginning of these verses. That always is a flashback to the previous words, right? We always say it's there for a reason. It's pointing us back. And if we were to think back to the previous section, James basically was teaching us, hey, because injustice is real, because oppression and suffering is real, and God sees it, which is what he said last week, because God sees injustice, because God sees this oppression that's taking place, be patient. Be patient until the coming of the Lord. And then he uses this phrase 3 different times in this handful of verses. And what he's teaching is that our patience is grounded not in our personal resilience, but in the certainty that Christ is returning. That I can trust that God is doing more than I can see. Now, let me put this again, a little bit of context here. In this first century church, in the early church, the belief that the doctrine that has to do with the end times, the last days, is often called eschatology, the study of end times belief. Well, in the early church, in the first century church, end times belief was not just kind of this mysterious, esoteric doctrine, and it was not something that YouTube influencers posted about to get clicks. That's kind of what it's evolved into today. But the return of Christ was their primary source of hope. Like, you have to think about this first century, like Jesus had just been ascended back to the Father in a previous generation and said, I'm coming again. Well, of course, they thought that meant like it's coming, like soon, like right around the corner. And because that's the urgency that Jesus commanded them to live with. And by the way, same for us. We'll touch on that in a second. But the return of Christ was their primary source of hope. And so when these displaced former Jewish believers who are questioning everything because of what they're going through, James is referring to them like, hey, the Lord is coming. Like, be patient in what you're facing because Christ is returning. What you're facing in this moment is not the end of the story. And then he uses this illustration of a farmer, that a farmer works diligently. He plants his crops. He does everything that he's supposed to do. But what he cannot do is cause the rain to fall. He cannot make it rain. As a matter of fact, if you were to go up to a farmer and he was standing by his field and he was performing some kind of dancing a jig of some sort. I'm not going to illustrate it. Bust out the dad dance. The kids always make fun of it. I have the same moves. And you were to go up to the farmer and he'd be like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, a rain dance. Like, rain, what are you doing? Why are you doing a rain dance? He's like, because rain dance is going to make it rain. He'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, if I dance in a certain way, then it's going to start raining. I can make it rain based on my dance. Now, if I'm dancing, maybe God's going to send a thunderstorm to shut it down, but I'm doing this dance to make it rain. You'd be like walking away like, dude, that guy's out of his mind if he thinks for 1 second a certain type of dance is going to make it rain or whatever he's doing. We would think that's insane, right? Because we know you can do everything you can to make the crops grow. You can do everything you're supposed to do from a human perspective, but what you cannot do is control the weather. What you cannot do is cause it to rain. What you cannot do is to create the harvest. The farmer actively does what he can do, and he trusts God with what he cannot control. So what is the point of that in James's teaching here? James's point is stop trying to control, listen, what is not yours to control. Stop trying to control what is not yours to control. You see, we would laugh at the farmer that was dancing to try to make it rain, and then we spend half our lives scrambling around and worrying about and trying to put pieces of the puzzle in place and stuff that we can't even control. And James says, look, stop trying to control what you cannot control and trust God. Trust God to do His part. Like, do what you can do. Be active and trust God with the rest. Having patience during trials, during the stuff that you're going through. We know this. Having patience during this season. This is marathon faith stuff. This is like long-term stuff. This is playing the long game, right? When we are embracing and having faith through seasons, we know most of the time it's not going to be an instantaneous fix. This is not microwave living. This is marathon living, that God is doing something and I must trust Him and rest in Him. And it may be a long process, and that's why He uses this word here, like you got to be patient through this and lean into the one who is in control. As a matter of fact, the phrase he uses here is establish your heart or strengthen your heart. And what that means is fix your heart on the truth that Christ is returning to make all things right. Fix your heart, establish your heart on the idea that God is in control. Get your eyes above the circumstances and fix your heart on who He is. And he says, look, the Lord is near. The Lord is at hand. His return is imminent. Now, think about this. Even though, it's 2,000 years since Christ left, the next big act in the redemptive story, the next big act in the unfolding of God's redemptive plan is to restore all things. And that happens with the second coming of Christ. That's the next big act on God's timetable. Now, we're like 2,000 years removed, right? And so we get a little impatient with that. You thought about that verse in the text that says 1,000 years are like one day on God's timetable? 1,000 years, one day. So guess what? We've been going for about 2 days, right? We feel like it's been a long time since the Lord returned. And then we read all this language in the New Testament about being urgent about the Lord's return, anticipating it, looking forward to it, living with this eagerness. But we lose sight of that because in our minds, well, it's been 2,000 years and it hasn't happened. And God's like, I don't like giving images of God, but he's yawning up there like it's been 2 days. And so we live with this urgency. We are patient in our waiting because of the certainty of the promise that the Lord is returning. And so we live with an urgency and awareness about us because the Lord is at hand. Verse 9, James continues to teach us in these moments, in this season. He gets really practical here. Do not grumble against one another, brothers. There's our family language again. So that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. What James is teaching in this verse is that while we're waiting, that we're to be kind to each other. Be kind in the waiting. Be kind in the waiting. We tend to become irritable and short-tempered and reactive and critical when we're under pressure. Am I only talking to me? We tend to become irritable and short-tempered and reactive and critical when we're under pressure. And if you're like me, my frustration spills out onto those I claim to love the most. I feel like I'm talking to myself. I don't see a lot of this is all of us, right? My frustration tends to spill out onto the people that I claim to love the most because this kind of close circle conflict often happens during times and seasons of pressure. And I think all of us can relate to this. And by the way, this time of the year tends to increase that. There's a lot going on. Ash and I were talking about that just today, this morning. The busyness of the season. And when do we have time for this? And we got Christmas stuff and end of the year stuff at the job. And Levi's active in this basketball season with practices and games, it seems like every day. And there's just a lot of stuff going on. Family planning and gift wrapping, and have all the Christmas presents been bought? And all this pressure and all this stuff accumulates until we are like that old school tea kettle on the stovetop that's just whistling and just ready to boil over on whoever is the closest to it. And usually that's our closest circle of people. And this verse reminds us that God cares about our human relationships during times of suffering and pressure. That hard times are not an excuse to become harsh toward the people that we love. And then James uses this kind of weird phrase like the judge is near. And we hear that and it kind of causes us to pause the judge is near and ready to take action. But that's not how he's using this. He's not using it to scare us. He's using it to remind us, hey, Jesus is close. And he helps, don't miss it, he helps and comforts the hurting, those who are under pressure. Turn to him. And by the way, God takes serious how we treat each other under pressure. So we don't allow the weight of our circumstances to impact the health of our closest relationships. Well, how do we do that? We remember that he is near even in our most difficult moments. And so I can lean into him. And when I lean into him, it helps me deal properly with the pressure. And it helps me, keeps me from allowing that to boil over to the people that I love the most. I can be kind even in my most intense moments when I'm leaning into the one who is near to us and close to us and who is at hand. Man, this audience that James is writing to, they're under pressure. They've been displaced, suffering, going through stuff. They're not sure that Jesus is coming back. And in those moments when the pressure builds, the tendency is to lash out, to be harsh and unkind to those that we love the most. And James is reminding us, the Lord's near. Like he comforts us. He's our provider. Like lean into him. And that vertical relationship of leaning into him will impact our horizontal relationships, particularly those that we hold the tightest. And so instead of lashing out at them, and enables us through the most intense moments to lean into him and to surround ourselves with the love of those who are closest. All right, let's keep working through this. Verse 10. James continues with examples. As an example of suffering and patience, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Behold, we consider those blessed who remain steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you have seen the purpose of the Lord. What was his purpose? How the Lord is compassionate and merciful. And so to, again, provide encouragement to these oppressed, suffering believers, James says, remember, there are others who have gone before who waited patiently for the Lord. Remember those who have gone before, who endured with patience, who made it through. And then he uses these two examples for inspiration. He uses the prophets. The only thing about the prophets, they suffered simply for obeying God and speaking truth, didn't they? Like they did what God called them to do and nobody wanted to hear it. And so, man, they went through some tough stuff. They went through some physical harm. Some of them lost their lives for doing those two things, obeying God and proclaiming his truth. It says, don't forget the prophets who suffered simply for obeying God, speaking truth, suffering for righteousness. And so what James is telling us here, like suffering for righteousness for the follower of God is not abnormal, but normal. So be faithful in your trial because you're going to go through some stuff. And then he uses the second example of Job. And if you've been around church at all or Bible person at all, you know the story of Job. And Job's life revealed that God writes longer and better stories than we anticipate. And that he is compassionate and merciful even in seasons of suffering and difficulty. And you read Job's story, that first part of the account, it didn't seem very merciful and compassionate. Why? Because God was writing a bigger story, wasn't he? God was writing a longer story than what happened to Job at the beginning of the story. And that Job had to be patient and steadfast to see the story that God was writing. And so James uses these illustrations and he reminds us, like, hey, you're not the first person to walk this path. You're not alone. Suffering is not random. God is writing a bigger story, and he is faithful in every season of life. And he can be trusted even when I can't see his bigger plan. So be encouraged because others have walked this path before you. And their journey testifies of God's faithfulness. So find encouragement in their story. Here's one of the things I love about City Church. Some of you have been through some stuff. Man, you got some stories. You got some stories how God was faithful and how God showed up and how there was a long game here, right? And how God brought you through some stuff and healed you for some stuff and forgave you from some stuff and brought you onto a different path. Like we have some stories in this church. And the encouragement for us who have been through some stuff, who have some stories, is that we're to be a source of encouragement to other people. That we're to be the ones that encourage those who are going through some stuff. Now, one thing I've love about Ash and I's story is like there's very few people that we can't sit across from that we can't say like, I get it. I get what you're going through. I've been there. I've gone through it. I identify with it. And a lot of you the same way. You've been through some stuff. And so we can sit on those stories of encouragement and keep them to ourselves, or we can be the source like James is talking about, where, man, I can put my arm around you and say, man, I get it. I get what you're going through. I identify with it. Let me pray with you and hang in there. And you're going to get through this because God brought me through it. And God was faithful to me through it. And He's going to be faithful to you just like He was faithful to me. Find encouragement in the stories. Be the source of encouragement. And when you're going through it, man, look to people who can encourage you. Like, bring that to the table. Like, I'm going through some stuff right now. I need some prayer. My marriage is struggling. Be honest about those things. I'm having a hard time with this kid that God's entrusted to me. Man, I don't know about this job. Like, you need some people on your journey that can come around you and say, it's okay. God's faithful. And I can encourage you because He's been faithful to me and He's going to be faithful to you. Brothers language in James. We're family. And family goes through stuff together. So be encouraged. And then 12, man, this is kind of an unusual verse here. But above all, that's a big phrase. All the stuff I've been talking about, he says, above everything, my brothers, again, family talk, gather around, let's talk about this. Do not swear. He's not talking about cussing here. Do not swear even by heaven or by earth or any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation. What's James talking about here? To put it in just the simplest terms I know how, like when you're going through some stuff, man, remain honest and simple with your words while you wait. Remain honest and simple with your words while you're waiting, while you're going through things. Man, this verse seems so random, but it is so deeply practical. And the reason why he uses this above all language, because if you're like me, I think most of you are, pressure tempts us to cut corners with our words. Suffering and seasons of intensity cause us to cut corner with our words. We've all been in that place. God, if you will fill in the blank, then I will fill in the blank. God, if you'll do this for me in this season, then I will. Look, let's be honest. Sometimes that sticks, right? Some of you are sitting in these seats today because you had that moment in your life. It's like, God, if you will get me through this, I can promise you I'm going to be at church. I'm going to promise you I'm going to start walking. Like some of you there, and every once in a while you'll hear those stories. Most of the time we know that's not how it goes, right? So we have to be really careful, simple and honest with God and with each other in our moments of pressure. We have to avoid these like, God, I swear I will do this. We're a lot of football people in here. This is the old Hail Mary, right? This is the God, if you will get me through this. And we're throwing that Hail Mary, God, if you will mend this relationship, God, if this job situation will work out, or God, I made a terrible mistake here. If you'll somehow come behind me and clean this thing up. And we throw those Hail Mary passes. And guess what? Every once in a while, in football, college or pro, someone will throw a Hail Mary pass and it'll make replays for the next 10 years because some sucker will come out of the crowd and make that catch, right? We all can identify, if we watch football, with a few, 4th and 31 moments in the Iron Bowl where the dude makes the catch, right? We all flash back to those moments in our life. But guess what? Most of the time, what happens with the Hail Mary? It gets batted away, hits the dirt. It's unsuccessful, and you forget all about it. And so in our moments of pressure and intensity, when life feels unstable, we tend to exaggerate our speech and manipulate God and others with our promises. And James says, in these moments, just speak honestly and truthfully. Let your yes be a yes and your no be a no. When you are going through stuff, be careful with your words, because integrity in our mouth, integrity in our speech reflects what's going on in our heart. The integrity of our heart. So in times of pressure, guard your heart and protect your speech. Are you waiting on God for something you can't control? Strengthen your heart in Him. Are you tempted to blame, criticize, and grumble in your suffering? Remember, He's near. Lean into Him. Does suffering make you question the heart of God? See the compassion and mercy of God in the stories of others. Are you dealing with pressure that tempts you to manipulate or to exaggerate with your words? Protect your words by protecting your heart. Here's the good news. Waiting, listen, waiting, catch this, waiting does not equal wasting. We think it does. We think when we're sitting at that red light, we're wasting time. We think when we're sitting in traffic, we're wasting time. What we're talking about right here is big picture life stuff. And when God is not answering that prayer in the way that you desire or the timeline that you desire, we tend to think it's wasting time. But waiting is not wasting. How do we know? Well, here's how we know, and this is what we do as City Church. We're going to circle it back to Jesus because He's the greater one that lets us know that waiting is not wasting. So here's our gospel element to this entire text. Jesus is the reason that we can wait with hope. That we can wait with hope. James says, be patient. Why? The coming of the Lord is near. Here, the return of Jesus, listen, is not a threat. It's not something to be afraid of. The return of Jesus is a promise. And that promise brings comfort to the heart of the believer. And if you're watching somebody on social media or whatever that's using the return of Jesus as some kind of threat or some type of shape it up, Jesus is coming back, they're missing the point. The return of Jesus for the follower of Jesus is a message of hope and comfort. That He is returning to make things right. And because Jesus already came once to deal with sin at the cross and guarantees eternal life for His followers through the resurrection, we can trust that He will come again to deal with suffering, injustice, and brokenness. We are not waiting, listen, we are not waiting for a desired outcome. We are waiting for a person. We're waiting for Jesus. We're not waiting for some outcome that we desire. We are waiting for the one who died for you and that is returning for you. His promise is that He has not abandoned us, that He is preparing the final harvest. And so we wait with hope and we endure with patience, not rooted in our feeble abilities, but in His faithfulness, that He who started this good work in us will complete it. And that gives us hope, which reminds us of this gospel truth that Jesus strengthens us under pressure, doesn't He? That He is the one who strengthens us under pressure. So here's what we do. We talk about this all the time in the James series. James says, strengthen your hearts. And we tend to immediately make this some type of admonition about us. That we have to somehow man up, right? That we got to buckle up. We got to somehow power ourselves up, right? We got to go Power Ranger on it. And we got to somehow establish ourselves or strengthen our hearts. But the encouragement here, the gospel reminds us this encouragement to establish our hearts is not about you trying really hard to be strong. The encouragement here is stay strong in and through the strength of Christ. That He is the source of our strength. That Jesus set His face toward Jerusalem, toward the cross, and endured for the joy that was set before Him. And that power now lives in us through the Holy Spirit. Here's good news. On our own, on my own, I'm not strong enough. And neither are you. We are not strong enough. We are weak. We are broken. But guess what? In Christ, through what Christ has done, we have the strength to endure, not by some kind of sheer grit in life, but by the grace that He gives. So stay close to Jesus. Lean into His Spirit. His strength enables us to hold steady in the storms of life. He strengthens us under pressure. Lean into Him. Man, aren't we so prone that in our most difficult moments, we love to trust Jesus when everything's going well and everything's blessed. But man, as soon as the pressure comes, As soon as something happens, in that moment, like we feel like we got to man it up in those moments. Like we got to be the ones that somehow pull it through. Rest in what he has done and the strength that he provides. All right, what about this? We got two more and we're done. Jesus shows us that suffering is never the end of the story. I love this. Jesus shows us that suffering is not the end of the story. James points to the prophets and he points to Job. Why? Because their stories end with God's faithfulness. That God was faithful to them all the way to the end. The gospel declares, the good news of the gospel says, Jesus is the greater prophet. Jesus is the true and better Job. Like the prophets, Jesus suffered for righteousness. Like Job, Jesus was innocent yet afflicted. Unlike Job and the prophets, Jesus endured all the way to death. Death on a cross. And God vindicated him through the resurrection. Because God brought Jesus through suffering into resurrection glory, we can be confident that he will do the same for us even in our hardships. What you're going through is not the final chapter. The resurrection of Jesus, our resurrection, because of the resurrection of Jesus, is the final chapter. Jesus reveals that suffering is never the end of the story. And then here's our last one. Jesus is the merciful and compassionate Lord. This language that James uses here at the end. He ends the section with God's character. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. And on the cross, Jesus proved once and for all how compassionate and how merciful God is. And now, this is James's point, this compassionate and merciful God is near. He is standing at the door, ready to return. On the cross, Jesus proved once and for all how compassionate and how merciful God is. And so in your frustration, in your discouragement, in your waiting, in your anxiety, you can rest in this. The one who is standing at the door is full of compassion. The one who is near, the one who is at hand, he is merciful. That he loves you more than you can possibly love him. That his nearness is comfort, not condemnation. That his return is rescue, not rejection. Because Jesus suffered for us, rose for us, and is returning for us, we can wait with hope. We can endure with grace. We can love with patience. And we can live with integrity, even in seasons of pressure and uncertainty and waiting. Do you enjoy waiting? Not many of us. But what we can know through the good news of the gospel is that waiting is not always wasting. That waiting is actually strengthening. Because in the waiting, he is compassionate and merciful. Let's bow our heads for prayer.